Hello, YouTube. So, this is my first time streaming from this computer, so this might all go terribly, terribly wrong. So this is kind of going to be a going over the aftermath of what happened in Washington the other day and how it's going now. And spoiler alert, for quite a lot of people, it's not going so well. And yeah, but this is undoubtedly going to be what is associated with Trump. And this hasn't happened really ever before. Yeah. We'll go over how the Trump supporters have immediately tried to pass this off as you see all those people with the Trump 2020 signs and the MAGA hats? They're all actually Antifa operatives who, I mean, they really are the boogeymen for these people that can seamlessly pull off any stunt, no matter how complex or convoluted. And you know, you take a look at Trump's promises beforehand. You know, he was going to build the wall. He was going to give people health care that was going to be so cheap and so plentiful that he was going to revoke Obamacare and give people something that was much better. And that's all there ever was. There was never actually any change. He just took away the Obamacare stuff and left it with an empty promise. Which is kind of what you get if you got a salesman in charge of it all. But yeah, it's not actually a burning White House. But to future generations, I'm not so sure they're going to be able to tell. Anyway, you know, and to an extent, this is absolutely the end of Trump. After this, his allies have left him. He overplayed his hand, and there's this thought that comes to mind. He is, in many ways, the Littlefinger character here, who would leave the entire country in ashes if he could sit on the Iron Throne. You know, with the Game of Thrones, you either win or you die. There is no middle ground. And that's kind of where Trump is at the moment. He's now almost completely bereft of allies. If he gets impeached again, as looks like is going to happen, I mean, if it goes through successfully this time, and, you know, once the long knives come out for Trump, and to a degree they already have, who are his allies now? And he used to have Twitter, where he would give people lots of funny nicknames. Well, he's banned off Twitter now. So what's he going to do now? Anyway, so we're going to take a look at maybe the most inept revolution ever. Almost sort of an accidental redneck revolution type thing. And of course, it's going to start with this guy, who I don't know what his name is, but he's now been arrested. You'll notice this is the pattern with lots of people who have been arrested since, is for some reason they decided to shave before they got arrested. Not quite sure. He looks like he's been crying a lot as well. But, you know, when he wasn't crying, and he was sitting in Pelosi's chair, I mean, this is the thing. Pelosi previously had sort of 0% approval rating. Now she's, compared to this lot, kind of the good guy. Anyway, it looks to me, I've been trying to identify what the hell this object here is. And to me, it looks kind of like a stun gun. You know, one of these guys. Yeah, you get these little prongs on things. And you know, is that what he's got stuck out of his, stuck out here? Yeah, it could be. Yeah, it looks like he's also decided to share in Trump's penchant for orange. Anyway, you know, so I don't know if that is a stun gun. Difficult to tell from these photos. But yeah, not a good look. And yeah, he stole a load of stuff from Pelosi's office in the form of letters and the such like, which uh, yeah, national security issue and the such like. He could well be in a lot of. He could be fairly deep in the crap there, sitting in Pelosi's chair with a stun gun, stealing her stationery and the such like. Oh, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, then we have this guy who was stealing the speaker's seal of the Speaker of the United. I didn't know the speaker had a seal, but apparently they do, and it goes back to 1789. Beautiful picture, by the way. So nice of you to wave on the way out. Yeah. All the shits and giggles until it goes. You broke into the very heart of the democratic seat of the country and started stealing stuff. I'm not so sure that goes under the category of hijinks. Anyway, you might be thinking, well, immediately Twitter went crazy, branding all of these people as Antifa operatives. For some reason, Antifa is this Kraken-type organization that can instantly infiltrate anything perfectly without anyone noticing and make them do things like storm the White House, even though that's kind of, Trump stood up there and said, we're going to march down to the White House and we're going to show them, you have to be strong. He didn't say you have to dominate them this time, but it was very much in that flavor that you have to be strong. You have to show them you can't be weak. And if Mike Pence is down there, we have to encourage him to do the right thing. Incidentally, there were, I didn't pull it up this time, but there were people chanting "Hang Pence," which is like, hang on. So you think these are Antifa operatives who managed to get a Trump crowd to start chanting "Hang Pence" after that's kind of what Trump had encouraged them to do anyway. This guy, if he is an Antifa operative, he's the one who kind of likes hanging out with the Trumps themselves. So real deep cover there. Amazingly deep cover. So that make Donald Trump Jr. an Antifa sympathizer now, or I'm not quite sure where all this is going. Anyway, you might also remember there was the where was he? The shaman guy, the QAnon shaman. This guy, who was So there he is. Clearly, Antifa has links going all the way up to Trump's lawyer. Anyway, so immediately after, there were pictures of this guy in the White House. People immediately started saying, seen him at a Black Lives Matter protest like that, you see. Except it turns out, no, he's a counter-protester. And if you blow up, if the sign wasn't so wonderfully cropped there, it says, Q sent me. And this was tweeted. So I was watching this all live, it turns out. I've never watched any part of the American Congress. It's so mind-numbingly boring, especially all the pomp and circumstance about, who's counting the votes. Who on earth would ever watch this anyway? So it turns out I was watching it live, or I had it on in the background. And, there was going to be a recess, and I just assumed it was because I didn't have the video up. I assumed it was because there were too many people interrupting. So what they were doing is they were going to count the vote, and of course they would have speakers for and against. The speakers for would say, the people have voted. We've investigated all the allegations of fraud, and all of them have no substance to them whatsoever. And then the Republican lot would stand up and they would say, Well, it's democracy. It's really important that we actually count the vote fairly. And there are a lot of people who think it wasn't counted fairly. And this would just go backwards and forwards between people speaking in 5-minute sections, essentially saying exactly the same thing. That everything has been investigated. All legal recourses have been pursued, and they've found absolutely nothing. There is diddly squat here. And then the other lot would stand up and say, yeah, but a lot of people think that it was. So we should not have the election because lots of people didn't believe it. Not quite so sure how you would ever have a successful election if that's your bar for sort of, discounting the result of an election. Anyway, so it turns out that this has been hideously cropped, and you take a look around, and that's funny. That's really funny. You will find there's the original pictures somewhere. Yeah, the original pictures of Q sent me. In fact, he's a sort of fairly well-known figure called the Q Shaman or something. So, he's apparently been arrested as well, even though here he is nicely posting. So, we're getting all these people who are Antifa operatives that have infiltrated, apparently, all the way up to at least Donald Trump Jr. Anyway, and these weren't minor bit players saying that it was all basically Antifa who were doing this. This is this guy's incredible. Who is he? Mo Brooks, the Alabama's 5th District Congressman. Political discourse welcome. Blocked for profanity, defamation, lying. Please retweet good info. Guess what he starts putting out. Anyway, this is where he's actually tweeting through everything, and here we go. This is one of House recessed until order and safety can be assured. Rumor Antifa fascists in backward MAGA hats. I mean, it's like, for fuck's sake, do they need tin foil under their MAGA hats so you can prove that Antifa are a bunch of I wouldn't. What's the most sophisticated op that Antifa has ever put together? We'll come on to that later anyway. Time will tell what the truth is. Indeed it will. But, in the meantime, let's tweet out the rumor. And he was also tweeting out that I think he was one of the ones who tweeted out again, don't rush to judgment. Fake news. He likes his fake news media stuff a lot. So this is... Please don't be like the fake news media. Don't rush to judgment on assault of the Capitol. Wait for investigation. No? Yes. Where's the other one? Yes. Okay. We'll wait for the investigation. Evidence is growing that fascist Antifa. At this point, you do have to kind of bury your head in the ground. Antifa actually stands for anti-fascist. Fascist anti-fascists orchestrated capital attack with clever mob control tactics. Seriously? You think that the MAGA crowd was controlled somehow by some psyop? I mean, look, Antifa have an interesting history that goes back. For a long time, they were essentially communists, which communists were, to be fair, fairly anti-fascist. In fact, if you go way back, the original anti-fascists were Churchill and Roosevelt, along with Stalin, of course. And there was quite a lot of it was quite a popular thing at the time to be an anti-fascist. Anyway, after World War II, it kind of faded, and it made a resurgence more recently. And they part of it does. Part of these criticisms of Antifa, that they're basically, well, I mean, there was a time they were fairly well associated with the anarchists. So it sort of essentially became a backwater thing that got hijacked by all sorts of crazies. So, I mean, the Antifa, actually, the anti-fascist thing is not really what the organization is about now. You could say sort of same thing about, the feminists, that, they're not really feminists anymore. This is going back to when I quit the skeptics movement, that they weren't really skeptics either. There comes a point when, the organization, by its actions, aren't what it calls itself. But anyway, one thing you could never really accuse Antifa of was being organized, in any real sense or form, let alone having hordes of trained operatives to infiltrate a crowd. I mean, where do they practice controlling Trump crowds? I'm just curious. Anyway, so and this guy's a lawmaker of some sort who's please retweet good info, and be warned Monday of growing Antifa threat. Anyway, and he did have some picture of this guy who, I don't know. I've not looked into the details, but I mean, this is one of the bizarre things. People who usually get into these organizations tend to, if they weren't extremists in one thing, they'd be extremists in another thing. And so, it's fairly common that people who are really keen on, one religion, quit one religion and become fanatically devoted to another. And so it wouldn't surprise me if some of these people are flipped. I mean, you get the, like say, for instance, Tim Pool, who, he started off, believe it or not, in the Occupy Wall Street. And Baked Alaska is another one, actually. Baked Alaska is hilarious. But yeah, let's do Tim Pool first. So Tim Pool started off with Occupy Wall Street, and now he almost exclusively preaches this Trump can do no wrong doctrine. Basically, no matter what it is he looks at, Trump is right. So, in fact, I'm sure we'll get onto some of that. In fact, let's see if we can actually find some of Tim Pool's. There we go. So Tim Pool basically puts out all of these videos saying, everyone is completely justified to feel wronged and the such like. This is what we call sort of stoking the fires. And then acts all shocked when stuff goes south, which was entirely predictable. So, I mean, let's just take, any movement, doesn't matter which one. So we're going to need a little drawing board at this point. Here we go, little drawing board. And any organization which you get is going to, so here you're going to have liberals, they're only, or people who aren't the opposite of fanatical, whatever that is, anti-fanatical. And over here, we're going to have the sort of fundamentalist-y type people. And it doesn't matter what group you're dealing with, whether it's religious, whether it's, Islam or Trump supporters or Antifa or whatever. It doesn't really matter. You're going to get some sort of curve like this, right? Where over here, it's you're just in it because your boyfriend's in it, or your girlfriend thinks it's a honourable pursuit or some that sort of thing. Then you get some, a lot of sort of meh supporters, and then you get some various thresholds, and it turns to be these thresholds which tells you how crazy the people behind it are. So if you're sort of flying planes into buildings and such like. Yeah, I mean, what point do you distance yourself from all of this? Or if you're, saying that we should march down and be strong in front of the Capitol, and right, so ballpark figures. Let's take a look at the state, the Capitol. Okay. I actually did a rough count of the Trump people at the rally. Now, to be fair, the mere fact that if you actually turn up at one of these rallies means that you're fairly dedicated anyway. I mean, you had to get to Washington. You're talking outlays of significant amounts of money just to get there. So, I mean, you're almost a committed group of people by the time you get there. My reckoning was 10,000 was my rough head count. If you take a look at the number who actually go up here, it's not that many. It's only about 1,000 people there or something. So, you take a look at it in curves like this that, okay, this is just going to have to be the Trump supporters who are sort of fairly fringy in themselves. And even if 9/10 of them were normal people, that still means you've got 1,000 crazies who are willing to introduce themselves to the Capitol. But some of them were hilarious. Where is she? Where's our girl? Who was so brainwashed by the Antifa operatives that no. Yes. Oh, she is just precious. I'll let her speak for herself.
What's your name? Where are you from?
My name is Elizabeth. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee.
And why did you want to go in?
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution.
We're storming the Capitol. It's a revolution. I think that might be against the law, maybe just a little bit.
Thank you.
Anyway, so she basically complains that they maced her for trying to start a revolution. If only all revolutions needed to fend them off was a little pepper spray. Anyway. Yeah, so you got to be pretty delusional to just expect to be able to storm the Capitol without consequences, or indeed to invite a crowd of 10,000 people to Washington for a Save America. I think that's what was it? March to Save America or something? Was that his rally? And in his March to Save America rally, he tells people that we're all going to march down to, to the Capitol building to, yeah. So Trump is no one is standing by him now. I mean, you've got to look up until this point. He even up until the point when they were reading the votes, they had a whole horde of people. This was expected to go on for days with, someone protests the votes counted from a state, and then they have to go to the Senate and debate it, then they have to go back to Congress and debate it before they can ratify it. This was expected because Trump had like 100 congressmen or something who were, loyalists who would do this for him. And in the end, that all evaporated, and it was all done on the one day. So, absolutely Trump is out. And even whilst they were in the building, he put out the messages saying, we love you, but go home. It's a little weak. These people were actually violently storming the seat of American democracy. You might want to mention that they actually did something wrong. But no, go home. We love you. And yeah, the next day he comes forward, and there's almost this hostage-like video where he says that he's committed to the peaceful transfer of power. At which point, I assumed someone had explained to him he was in genuine legal jeopardy. Not just kind of you might get impeached and lose your, presidential pension and not be able to run again. You're going to end up in jail for this sort of thing. Especially seeing, they've now had one of the Capitol buildings police was actually has since died of his injuries. And there was some fairly decent, rioting in here. It wasn't all sort of, smiles and mulling around gently. The immediate response was to claim they were all infiltrated by Black Lives Matter. And some woman who was shot, and Concordance really hit the nail on the head with this tweet here, where they basically accused Antifa operatives of convincing her to, all the videos come out since, and there is absolutely no way. There were sort of peaceful protesters trying to convince them not to smash down the barricades and try and gain access to the bit that was guarded by men with guns. But no, they decided they were going to go in anyway. This is where these people are. My heart breaks for this patriot. She had no idea Antifa infiltrated. She was being led to her death. And Concordance hits the nail on the head with, you can't save them, you won't change their minds. Facts will be bent around their iron-bound beliefs. And it's a sort of interesting question, how do you actually convince people that, no, this was just a hardcore bunch of Trump supporters who stormed the White House? So many. Like I was saying, this is Trump's legacy. Erecting gallows in front of the White House. Yeah, this is Antifa as well. This is another thing that's come out lots is, the comparison to the Black Lives Matter protesters, which, you have to have a little, just a little nuance with these things. I mean, you have to be honest. If you're going to look at America, the simple reality, it was born out of an act of sedition, which was a rebellion against the British government of the time, which was kind of run by a crazy king who wanted them to pay lots of tax, which they really weren't keen on. But even at that, with the American Revolution, the number of people who were on board with it and the number of people who weren't was kind of 50-50. It was this is, if you think about it, all revolutions have to happen this way. You have to get to some tipping point where, people are on board with it. Now, of course, most people, even in the revolution back then, in fact, let's get our graph back, shall we? Right, so let's get our graph back, and we're going to have our American Revolution graph here. Whee, like that. Okay. So, there are the loyalists, which we'll have on the left, or whatever, the people who wanted the king. And there were, Britain at the time was, or the United Kingdom, I don't know what it was called back then, but they were, genuine world power, and America was kind of this backwater colony that, you only have to look at the conditions under which the Revolutionary War was fought. And it's things like they didn't really have any metal to make cannons and the such like. So, there were these battles where they fought. And, the biggest factor is they got some cannons from the fort off the British. And, these were important later. So, I mean, the whole thing was kind of done on limited resources anyway. And then you've got the revolutionaries or the Republic or whatever. Anyway, so, if you ask Joe Public, it was kind of 50-50. But as with all of these things, a lot of people in the middle here with all politics, they really don't care that much. The kid needs to be fed, the crops need to be harvested. There's a new episode of whatever, Game of Thrones or whatever, I don't know. So, all of these things tend to be driven by the people who are willing to do something. And yeah, so if what sort of threshold do you need to get through of people who are willing to do stuff, who are really committed to actually overthrow a democracy type thing? Now, I actually know what it was like with the War of Independence, or or as it's known in England, the Great War of Treachery. I'm kidding. But it is an interesting thing that when you take a look at the Constitution of America, it's very much written full in the knowledge that they had just kind of had a revolution against a government that they didn't particularly like, and it's kind of hard to write in that, sedition against the government will not be tolerated when that's basically what you just did to make your new country. So there is this bit in the, I forget what it's, Constitution or whatever, but that says, if the government becomes corrupt, then you're legally allowed to rise up against it, like we just did. But that's never really been tested in American law. That you take a look at a lot of these sovereign citizen nuttery type people. They're all extremists over on one of these extremes. That means they're willing to do something. So with McVeigh, he blew up whatever the government building. Where was Timothy McVeigh? Kansas. Was it Kansas City? Anyway, he was. He thought he was striking a blow against a corrupt government, like he was entitled to do in the Constitution, and it didn't really work as a defense. So basically, if you're a small bunch of nutters and everyone else thinks, no, you're a small bunch of nutters, sorry, this bit about being allowed to rise up against a corrupt government doesn't really apply to you. And this thing in the Capitol's got a vibe like that to it. The only one which I'm sort of fairly familiar with in terms of democracies that were taken over was the one in Germany, when Hitler kind of was half elected, then seized power. And to do that, let's have Hitler on the left here. He had about a third of the people were devoted supporters. Right, so this is the thing. If a lot of your people are devoted supporters, you don't need that many of them. You only need about a third of the country to be devoted supporters to be essentially able to seize power. And this is mostly because all of these chaps in the middle here, they're not so. They can take it or leave it. And yeah, so if you get about 30% of the population who are devoted supporters, then you've got a problem. Now, Trump certainly has a lot of devoted supporters. To get 10,000 people into the Capitol is no minor feat. The problem is that you can't really overthrow the American government because it's vast. You have to get control of the military at some point, and I don't see them just sort of if the military is going to throw down anywhere, it's not going to be on the side of the people storming the Capitol building. This is not realistic. So with Trump, my reckoning is he's got maybe 20% of the population who really do vigorously support him. There's this thing that he said that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and they would still support him. And he's probably right there. And for everyone else, if you take a look at his approval ratings, they've never gotten over. His approval ratings were always 60-40. So it's about here somewhere. Actually, it's not quite that far over. It's more like here. So with Trump, it was always just under 2/3 didn't approve of what he was doing. And like I was saying, you only need about 1/3 who vigorously support you. Even just taking a look at the last election, it was touch and go whether he was going to win or not. But now, what's for Trump next? I mean, for me, I was looking over the video that I did on Trump all the way back before his first term. And this thing, honestly, this is nail on head. 4 years ago, even before he had put his foot into office, it calls out almost every bit of the Trump bullshit. Most particularly, he starts off with the birtherism. And it's all about, you talk about something and say there's lots of evidence for it. You can't believe how much they're finding. And let's just start out with Trump on his birtherism.
On to Hillary. Trump, of course, was one of the birthers. Yeah, he spent a great amount of time trying to get Obama to show his birth certificate.
Get off the birth certificate issue.
Why don't you?
Because you know what? 3 weeks ago when I started, I thought he was probably born in this country. And now I really have a much bigger doubt than I did before.
President Obama is the least transparent president in the history of this country.
I mean, you can see he's very limited used car salesman range here. This is exactly what Trump is doing now. What he was doing with Obama's birth certificate is exactly what he's doing now with the election was stolen. There's so much evidence. You won't believe how much evidence we're finding.
There's now...
Why wouldn't he just... I'm
lying.
starting to think that he was not born here. And if he weren't lying, why wouldn't he just solve it? And I wish he would. I have people that actually have been studying it and they cannot believe what they're finding. You are not allowed to be a president if you're not born in this country. He may not have been born in this country. And I'll tell you what.
Yeah, I mean, this is Trump. Talk about something like there's something wrong with it, even though you know there's nothing wrong with it. And this is how... he starts all of his, Russia hoax type thing. How many convictions were there on that Russian hoax? What was it like? He's the only president in history where every single member who ran his campaign was charged with federal crimes. To call this a hoax is like, and the only reason Trump didn't get prosecuted was because... he was president. You can't charge a sitting president with, crimes, which that's not true in a few days, by the way. So, taking bets now. Does Trump actually pardon himself? Oh, I'm taking a look at the comments. Thunderfoot joined the social justice warriors. Sad. Yeah, right. Sure he did. Yeah. But this is welcome to MAGA world, where there really isn't in any nuance between you don't believe what Trump says, therefore you must be a social justice warrior, and it's like I'm not quite so sure that how it works in the real world. For certain with Trump, it's there was this where the birtherism. This was such a big red flag. And what was there after the birtherism? Oh, yeah, that's right. There was the climate change was a hoax. And there's even a bit in here about, the CDC, where, Trump would be head of the CDC, or he would be in charge of appointing someone to be in a chair of the CDC, Center for Disease Control. And, how would he handle that with his view on being an anti-vaxxer? And his anti-vaxxer stuff is exactly the same. It's like, well, we don't know, therefore it's probably true, or it might be true, or we should act like it's true. The fact that we know it's not true and can demonstrate it isn't important to Trump because he can make hay out of the doubt. And he does the exact same thing with the birth certificate. He does the exact same thing with climate change. He does the exact same thing with vaccines. And yeah, now he does the exact same thing with the election. Every court, yeah, he's what? Essentially, he's never won any of these court cases where he's claimed there is some sort of fraud. It's always, we have lots of evidence, and you won't believe how much evidence we're finding. But whenever it goes to court and they say, okay, let's see your evidence, the answer comes back, well, actually, we don't really have any. And some of those exchanges are hilarious in that, the barristers kind of have a legal obligation. If they start pulling the stuff that Trump is pulling here in front of the judge can disbar them. So you can't really deliberately try to mislead a judge like that. And so you get these hilarious exchanges where they're saying, we didn't have any counters in the room. And it says, well, the judge asks, were there any counters in the room from, your observers? And they say, well, yes. And it's like, well, okay, so what's this case about then? That's basically the end of it. Chalk up another loss for the Trump train, sorry. So what happens? What's next for Trump? I don't remember what else he does in all of this. Oh, yeah, and he's, complete two-facedness. There are bits where he's saying no president should be allowed to read off a teleprompter. Even while during his campaign, he was just reading off teleprompters the whole time, and he still reads off teleprompters the whole time. It's the absolute shameless hypocrisy. The fact that he's never run a business that, Trump Airlines failed, Trump casinos failed. How the hell do you fail at a casino? Trump marriages, mortgages, university. That was another one that really got me. I mean, Trump University was such an outright scam that the mind boggles. Oh, and then of course we get on to the there was no wall built in Mexico. Trade deficit went up, debt went up, EU economy in shambles, and a third of a million COVID deaths. And you take a look at my grievances why you should not have Trump as a president, and it's quite simple. The guy's a bullshit artist. Right from the very start, you could see it all back then. What happens if you get a guy who doesn't really care whether it's true or not, as long as he can get lots of publicity out of it. And you get all these devoted supporters who really don't care whether it's true or not because they feel Trump. They feel that he's their guy, that he is the anti-authoritarian, the anti-elitist. Well, spoiler alert: if you need someone to design your vaccines, they need to be kind of elitist. They kind of need to know what they're doing. And having a leadership that doesn't believe in vaccines so Trump's presidency has been a disaster. The only thing he was ever really good at was, preaching to the converted, this, small base of his that would never leave him under any circumstances. He was very good at communicating with those in terms of 3-word slogans. And they're all basically two things that Trump will be remembered for. The first one is that. And the second one is 3-word slogans. In fact, in this case, sometimes 2-word slogans. There's this video of all these guys smashing down the door of the Capitol buildings, chanting "Hang Pence." Yeah. Trump's legacy. Anyway, so where's this going afterwards? Well, up until this point, right, there was a very real chance that after Trump left office, he would basically continue. He had this huge devoted base that basically hung on all of his words, that were convinced that Q was real, that they should trust the plan. Let's get a look at our trust the plan QAnon supporters. Not him. Not him. Him. This is our QAnon trust the plan guy. Yeah. The thing is that this really has... The die is cast on this one. There's no putting the genie back into the bottle at this point. So what's going to happen with Trump next is he's not going to leave office, and he's a toxic commodity now. No one's going to touch him. Everyone is... There was this thought that he would basically start up his own media company when all this stops, where he would basically keep pimping the same conspiracies to the same bunch of nutters who basically throw money at him. And they would be happy, he would be happy. But the thing is now, I'm not so sure I see even that happening. You know, there comes a point when you are just so toxic that, no one wants anything to do with you. So, for instance, like Milo. Milo was for a long time the darling boy. He always was triggering the libs and doing it so very, very well. Until he started saying things that not even his Republican... I'm not sure what to call them. Let's go for paymasters. I'm not so sure it was quite that simple. But with Milo, he said things that were so outrageous, he got banned off basically every platform. And the last I heard, he was pimping out fake medicine. God, I can't say fake medicine. Snake oil pills on Alex Jones's InfoWars. That's basically where Milo is at the moment. And honestly, I think that's probably, that if Trump doesn't end up in jail, which there's very real grounds that he might end up in jail, oh gosh, so many fronts. Where to start? I mean, if he dodges the bullet on all the sedition stuff, or pardons himself or whatever, he can only pardon himself for the federal crimes. So he is being investigated for various tax improprieties that run into lots of money in New York State, where he can't pardon himself for state crimes. So there's this bit where Trump he does his interview on InfoWars. This was before he became president, and it wouldn't surprise me if that's actually where he ends up, on InfoWars selling pills. I can't remember where it was now. But yeah, so he was on Alex Jones, and when he was on Alex Jones, he was their man. Yeah. So yeah, you just see a super chat come through. Eventually, all con men push too far. I'm not so sure, but in this case, yeah, no. I mean, this is the end for Trump. He's now seen as toxic by such a large portion of the country that peddling fake vitamin supplements is probably about his measure. He's been kicked off Twitter. He's been kicked off Facebook. And And apparently, they were all pimping Parler for some time as an alternative for Twitter. These things never pan out, by the way, for reasons that should become very obvious the second you actually start taking a look at some of these things. That they are almost by definition a place where their voices are too extreme for the mainstream media. And eventually they do just become a den for people pushing ideas that are outside of everyone's comfort zone. And who wants to actually start an account on a place like that? Do I approve of him being kicked off Twitter? Well, there's part of me that it's like, I don't like people getting kicked off anything, but honestly, Trump, you always get people arguing the slippery slope argument that first of all they came for the the Nazis, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Nazi. Then they came for the right wingers, and I didn't say anything because I wasn't a right winger. And so it goes on, and then they came for me, and there was no one left to say anything, right? Which is basically a slippery slope argument. And, it carries more weight for the guy who actually initially said it all, grew up in, where that stuff was really rather pertinent. But the truth is, not all slopes lead to an absolute destination. And it's fairly easy to see a lot of this stuff, even on YouTube. Right? If you want to get banned off YouTube, it's simple. Stream all your videos naked. Now, is there anything particularly offensive about being naked? Well, not really, but YouTube's not the right forum for that sort of thing, right? Is that really an infringement on free speech? Does anyone actually feel particularly offended by this? Likewise, I think you'll find there's a fairly limited group of people who think that acts of sedition should be allowed on a platform, especially once you can actually see the effects of that directly on from, yes, let's go have a march on the Capitol, and it ends up like this. Really? There's no grounds for sort of taking this guy's Twitter privileges away? I mean, absolutely. I mean, if he hadn't told them all to go to Washington in the first place to have a Save Democracy rally, did he call it? What did he actually call his rally? I've forgotten now. Is it Save Democracy? Trump Save Democracy. I forget what he called that. Save America rally. There we go. Yeah. So that's what saving America looks like, folks. Yeah. Right. So let's go have a little back and forth with chat, and then I think I'm going to call it quits at that. So, any thoughts on all of this? I mean, personally, I think Trump's done, absolutely done. Question: who will run in 2024? I have no idea. In many ways, I am so looking forward to politics being boring again. The thing about Trump was it just one rolling bloody disaster after another with nothing ever actually getting done. And even now, when I see Biden take the stage, it's sort of the eyes glaze over and I turn off. The one thing that Trump did have was watchability. There was a strong element of elect a clown, expect a circus, but he was like that plus napalm. It was. Oh, by the way, incidentally, one of the guys arrested at this protest had a bunch of Molotov cocktails in his truck or whatever, along with assault rifles and whatever. He was deleted for fear of violence and dog whistles. Yep, and it's pretty difficult to say that they didn't have a fairly decent grounds for actually banning him. Incidentally, if it's 4 years ago, but if you fancy, you'll watch this video again that I put up, which had a terrible rating for me, but in the end, you could very well argue that this is what happens when you get this is a bunch of deplorables. Is there any other way to describe this than a basket of deplorables? Just saying. Might be too soon for some people, but and this is the thing. All of Trump's 3-word slogans ended up nowhere. The whole lock her up type thing, that didn't go anywhere. Build a wall, that didn't go anywhere. Make America great again. Buy Thunderfoot. Cool. No problem. Well, you're welcome. You're wrong. I might need more than that. They will be pardoned. This is the interesting thing. Trump can actually pardon these people. Like the guy with what looks like a taser in Pelosi's chair. He can actually pardon all these people. Let me caveat that. He can pardon them if he doesn't get removed from office first. And I'm not so sure that pardoning these guys is high on his priority list. If tech issue is not a Republican, for Republicans, they lose. This is the thing. There are valid arguments for censorship, but when this is the result of doing nothing, there comes a point when you're actually sort of culpable for this sort of thing. And there's a reasonable argument that class action lawsuit against these sorts of people. His nuclear codes and unilateral strike privilege have been revoked by Pelosi. Good job, A and B. Totally unheard of. Good. So at least Trump. This was actually for me a so genuine. I wouldn't say it was a real threat, but it's the sort of. Seeing as this looks like it's something out of a Hollywood movie, Trump becomes Skynet and decides to launch nukes at all of his enemies, like California and New York, and but I'm glad that he has lost his right to nuke things. Yeah, especially if all he has to do is claim there's a lot of Antifa operatives there. Trump can't pardon for state crimes, but the thing is that a lot of these are actual federal crimes. In that this is a capital, the Capitol building is all governed by it's all under federal control. None of these were state offenses. All these guys here are actually being charged with federal crimes. There might be state crimes that follow as well, but Trump can absolutely just pardon all these guys. I'm not so sure I see that happening, especially seeing some of these guys, pardoning the guy who turns up to the Save America rally that stormed the White House with a dozen Molotov cocktails in his car. If this doesn't seal your position in history, that certainly will. Quantum Overlord says he won't pardon them anyway. I can't see it on the cards. You take a look at the people he pardoned. These were Trump loyalists who had, they weren't a bunch of random minions, right? He's never pardoned any minions, as I can tell. He only pardoned them then there was some, bang for the buck to be gotten out of it. I mean, you could argue he's going to get some bang for the buck out of pardoning these guys because it will trigger the libs, which is kind of true. The problem is that it's probably also going to trigger 90% of America. What's with the Trump cult adoption in Europe? I missed that one. A and B. What's with the Trump cult adoption in Europe? This is the bizarre thing, is that there are actually loads of people all over the world who vigorously support him. One more. To pardon them would be to confirm that they're not Antifa. Yes. Yes. Yes, not Antifa. Probably not. But yeah, no, I mean, with a load of these people, yeah, these graphs that I keep pulling up, these general sorts of things that there are people who work in the department where I work, which deals with creating vaccines, that deals with creating antiretrovirals. And they were fully on board with Trump claiming that hydroxychloroquine was going to treat the coronavirus. And I went through it all with them. You must know this is bullshit. This is absolute bullshit. The idea that a new virus comes along and you just happen to have a tested chemical on the shelf that is a retroviral. It's not impossible, but it's never happened before, ever. Right? So what are the chances that it just miraculously works? And of course, that was all pimped out by conspiracy nutters, including Trump. I mean, Trump was pushing hydroxychloroquine for almost 6 bloody months. And in the end, yeah, it had no operational effect on the virus whatsoever. Yeah, unknown if Trump can pardon himself. Yeah, that's pretty much it. The problem is it's never been done before, because no one's really had a president like Trump before who might just consider who cares if it's an abuse of power. It's something that is I'm on paper allowed to do. So there's loads of people who say that if he pardons himself, it won't be valid anyway. You can't pardon yourself. But I mean, coming back to that hydroxychloroquine thing for a moment, yeah, I had people in a department that works on this sort of stuff who believed Trump's lies, always bullshit, on the hydroxychloroquine. And there were, fairly decent, fairly senior people who actually supported Trump. Some of it was kind of just the protest vote that he was the anti-establishment candidate, and you can sort of see where that's going. But I mean, essentially Trump became the anti-establishment candidate for a lot of these people. My MD family believed the alt-med conspiracy crap. Yeah, I mean, it's not by any means limited to well, okay, it is limited to conspiracy nutters, but conspiracy nutters permeate all walks of life. I know a guy who is a fairly decent engineer who was fully into the 9/11 conspiracy stuff. They're not people you would expect to buy into any of this. And I mean, you would know from my recent video on the composition of planes and why electric planes aren't going to work is, at least 20 tons of fuel. There's at least 20 tons of fuel in an aircraft. A few Molotov cocktails can do a lot of damage. 20 tons of flight fuel, it can cause some fairly decent fires. And when you have such an obvious explanation, reaching for conspiracy things about, melting pillars and thermite. And Trump 101. Why hasn't he produced his birth certificate? I send people to investigate his birth certificate, and you wouldn't believe what they're finding. this is what amazes me. All of this was in plain view, all the way back then, and I was kind of stunned at the response that I got to this video all the way back then. All right. I mean, it's true. Hillary had a lot of baggage, but if you got a choice between someone who has a lot of baggage versus the car salesman who pushes anti-vax conspiracies, birther conspiracies, global warming is a hoax conspiracies. Let's I'm happy to go with establishment for a bit on this one, but the one nice thing is that this looks like it might be an end to. It's just too iconic. This is almost a 9/11 type moment. That will be the image that follows. That is Trump's legacy. Yeah. Convince me I'm wrong. Well, yeah. That plus the wall that he built. You remember the wall that Mexico paid for? In fact, there were loads of jokes that, this is the best thing that Trump's done so far that can convince the Mexicans to build a wall. Is, America dissolving it into anarchy. Something like half of nurses polled, this is from A&B again, don't want to take the COVID vaccine. It's going to be, seriously? Half of nurses don't want to take it. That I'm surprised at. That I'm really surprised at. Because the thing is that nurses and all the frontline workers, they get exposed a lot to the coronavirus. I'd have thought they'd have been rather keen to take the vaccine early on. Thing is, through the conditions that created Trump are still there. Arguably even more so than before. I'm not so sure I buy that quantum. In that, in many ways, it's just a sigh of relief to have things turn back to normalcy now. It's just been so stressful that. I know I'm not a cross section of society, so I could be wrong here. But from what I see, it's just going to be such a sigh of relief to have things back to normal. Although back to normal, in the middle of a pandemic. Handsome Monkey, how will managed? COVID is. With the coronavirus, there are the new variants out there. So typically the way the viruses go is just, hey, JR. As viruses go on, they tend to they mutate to become more contagious and less deadly. But it's by no means a linear correlation. It can vary hugely. So it's quite possible that one of the variants that crops up is more infectious and more deadly. They're relatively small tweaks to a virus that do this sort of thing. Eventually you always end up with a virus that is more contagious and less deadly. But we're in early days here. And even with the new variant in the UK, it's like a factor of 2 more contagious or something, which, in practice means you roughly halve, you get group immunity, herd immunity at about 70% or 60-70% are immune to it. You double the infectiousness of the virus, you halve that number. So it gets progressively harder to get to herd immunity with the more transmissible virus. Thundercuck loves the EU. Well, I didn't go that far, but health services on the point of collapse. That I could well believe. I mean, the UK is terrible at the moment with the coronavirus. It's not so much leveling the curve. The curve is going straight up at the moment. But the infection rate in the UK is getting up for 1 to 2%, I think, which means that you're only with the wild spread rate at 2 to 3% infected. You don't have to worry about a vaccine in a month's time because everyone will have the virus. Let's keep our fingers crossed that something good comes through and the virus all gets under control. As for Trump, my prediction is, in a year's time, he's done. He's either bankrupt, in jail, or selling diet supplements on InfoWars, which is honestly where a lot of his these conspiracies would probably be better placed. Anyway, at that, I think I'm going to call it quits. So, many thanks for turning up, and I hope you enjoyed the stream. Many thanks for watching, and I will see you next time. Have a nice evening, folks.